Train movements, not muscles. This is a philosophy I've seen quite a few people online use. It's a line I've seen people say. It's a line I bought into years ago for a little while and even made videos on it. And I want to make sure that people understand that I take that back and why it's a problem. And it's something I've come to realize more and more the longer I coach. The longer I coach is a full-time endeavor, that it's really nonsense. And I'm not saying we shouldn't train movements. And I'm going to have in the background just some pressing work. Right, you guys see me do a heavy floor press. You see me do some speed benching, then a bunch of accessories. All right, here's the thing. Training movements for your volume isn't necessary. It's not beneficial. And there's no point in limiting yourself to the idea of training movements. In other words, people say, well, if you want to get good at bench pressing or floor pressing or the overhead press, that's just what you need to do. It's what they're basically saying. You're training a movement. Don't worry about the muscles, they'll catch up. Or even for sports performance. Well, the issue with that is we have to build the muscles, all right? We get force production from muscle mass and we actualize it through these other modalities. All right, like you see me doing the speed work, and speed work can build muscle. Don't get me wrong. You saw me doing a max floor press, all right? Okay, well, when we're doing that, we are training a movement because we're learning to produce force maximally. It's either slow or fast, but we are producing force through the planes of motion that we want. Right? That's training a movement. That's training a movement. But we're not going to maximize muscle potential or our potential for strength or force production, which comes from our muscle mass, by doing that. All that does is take the potential that we have and actualize it. Again, barring the speed work with enough volume can stimulate hypertrophy, but it's not going to maximize it. And you're going to have weak points in all these chains. Okay, you're going to have a weak link somewhere in all of these movements. And that weak link is caused by a muscle that's too small, and just training the movement will not always catch it up quick enough. It will limit the movement. So we have to train the muscles. Now, people will say, well, shouldn't we have movement pattern carryover with everything we do with those muscles? And it's like, well, no. If you need to bring your triceps up and you do a tricep extension, which you probably should be doing if your triceps are really weak, that's not going to have a movement pattern carryover. We could argue that overhead pressing, if you want to bring up your delts, doesn't have a movement pattern carryover to the bench. Completely different angles. But the overhead press can bring up the bench. Same thing, you'll see me doing some incline back here. Right, the incline can increase both the bench press and the overhead press because of the muscles involved. Not really the same movement pattern, because what do we know from joint angle specificity? We only get 15 degrees of carryover. Look at that angle difference. Now look at that angle difference. But it does carry over. And so what you see me doing here is doing exercises that will bring up my benching, right? We tested bench strength without leg drive using a floor press. Right? That's why our floor press tends to be lower than our bench unless we're really skinny and it's a partial, right? Because it stops 6 inches above your chest. But floor pressing is a good way to test what your straight bench is without leg drive, without technique, just your brute strength. You can look for the weak links there. But then you need to build those weak links up with hypertrophy. And you know what? You can do some stuff that has movement carryover. There's nothing wrong with that. But you shouldn't restrict yourself to that idea. It's irrational. Because here's the thing. Your hypertrophy type work doesn't even train movement patterns anyways. Right? When we're talking about training a movement, what is an athlete doing with it? They're producing maximum force. They're producing maximum force. Now, if we're up here doing 5, 6, 10, 12, 15 reps, that's not even how an athlete produces true force. It's not. When you see a boxer fight, when they're really producing force out in a boxing ring, do they hit 12 times in a row with the same arm back to back to back? No, it's usually a series of quick punches with a lot of force, usually way less than that, and they change stance or whatever, and they stop punching for a moment. See someone swing a baseball bat, throw a ball. They're producing force one time. Okay, a sprinter might do more. They might do more, but they can't produce maximum force for more than a few steps, really. Just getting off that block. So this idea that, oh, if we just train the movements with our volume, it carries over. No, because we're not producing maximum force. It's not the same thing. And in fact, the movement pattern matters very, very little, other than maybe some joint angle specificity for the hypertrophy. So you know what? If you want to come in and hypertrophy all your weak links for a movement pattern with movements that look nothing like it, there is no problem with that, right? Come in and do like I'm doing JM presses or some dumbbell extensions for triceps. Perfectly acceptable. You want to bring up your delts for your benching. Doing some overhead press and some incline. They do not have to have carryover. Now, ideally, you probably want maybe one movement to have some carryover, and that's acceptable. But you shouldn't feel restricted to that. It's ridiculous. It's limiting. It's dogmatic for no purpose. Because this stuff doesn't even have the same carryover anyways. You know what has carryover to your movements is doing your maxes and your speed work. Okay, now that can be a little more movement specific. Why? Because we are producing maximum force on every rep. On a 1 rep max, we're producing maximum force with such a weight that it's going to move slow. And with speed work, we're producing maximum force on every rep, just like the max, but we're able to do it fast because it's lighter. That's training movement patterns. Now that's the foundation of the conjugate system. But your repetition work, your volume for hypertrophy and for weak point training, that does not need to follow movement patterns. And there's no reason to think that way. And again, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying you can't take a movement out of your supplemental work for the day and have one that has some carryover, especially if it addresses a specific weak link. Okay, fine. But get in and build the muscles up. Yes, we need to train muscles. We need to train more than just movement patterns. We need to specifically target and train the weak muscles, the weak links in the movement patterns that we want to train. That's the best way to do it. It's the most efficient and effective way to get things done. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.